Hello, and welcome to a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video, where today we're going to be completing the game with the duo of Sudowoodo and Snorlax. Now, I do think that these Pokemon are going to do really well through the game, because Snorlax gets access to a ton of moves and has great stats, and Sudowoodo, being a rock type and getting access to Rock Slide very early on, should make a lot of the fights really easy. But the main reason that I'm doing this video is because unfortunately these two Pokemon weren't able to make it into the Babies Only video, despite their pre-evolutions being in the game. Anyway, Snorlax has 160 HP, 110 attack, 65 defense, 65 special attack, 110 special defense, and 30 speed, and gets access to just about every move you could want, with the only real downside being you have to wait till level 19 to get a solid normal type move. And Sudowoodo has 70 HP, 100 attack, 115 defense, 30 special attack, 65 special defense, and 30 speed as well. So they are equally as slow as each other, which is a commonality I was not expecting to see. And it gets access to mostly rock and normal moves, it gets a few fighting moves and earthquake that could come in handy. But most importantly, it gets Rock Slide at level 25, which is incredibly early for what I think is the best move of the game. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if Sudowoodo can make the most use of it because it's only got 30 base speed. So unless I outspeed incredibly slow Pokemon or Pokemon way under my level, I'm not really going to get many flinches, but Rock is still a great type for the final battle against Weevil. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to our Sudowoodo in particular, which has a lonely nature, raising its attack but lowering its defense, which is honestly fine. If it can hit harder with Rock Slide, that's probably better. It gets access to the Rock Head ability, which prevents all recoil damage from moves such as Double Edge. It could also have had the Sturdy ability, which prevents all one-hit KO moves from hitting, which isn't useful at all. And according to Bulbapedia, it gets Rock Throw, Mimic, and Flail by level 10. Our Snorlax, on the other hand, has a Serious nature, which is a neutral nature, which is honestly fine. It has great stats overall anyway. It gets the Thick Fat ability that halves all damage from fire and ice type moves. It could have also had immunity to make it immune to poison, but I flipped a coin and got Thick Fat. And according to Bulbapedia, it gets Tackle, Amnesia, and Defense Curl by level 10. So with that, let's go ahead and get right into it. And as you might expect from these two Pokemon, they didn't really struggle at all throughout the early game, so we're going to skip straight to the battle against the Red Power Ranger, and commence just a little bit of rambling. If you are enjoying this video so far, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Now, the main thing I want to note is that the Nintendo Direct for the Switch 2 just came out, and while I don't really have an opinion on most of it, what I do have an opinion on is the fact that they're bringing the GameCube to the console with the Switch Online service, where you can play not only Pokemon XD, but also Pokemon Coliseum. And since I've never played Coliseum before, that might be the best way for me to actually play the game and maybe make a video on it. Now, it is going to be a while before I even consider buying a Switch 2, but eventually I'll make a Coliseum video with my first reactions on the game. Anyway, now that we're done with the Red Trainer, we then move on, and Sudowoodo gets Low Kick at level 17, and Snorlax gets Headbutt at level 19, and I forgot to show it, but it also got Belly Drum, and we go into the battle against Laverina. She leads with a Beloved Disc and a Beautifly. I go for Rock Throw into the Beautifly, and I go for Belly Drum with Snorlax, which has my total HP, but it gives me +6 attack, which is incredibly strong. So I should just be able to sweep the team with Snorlax, but unfortunately I click too fast and I use Belly Drum a second time, which does nothing. Rock Throw does take Love Disc down to half. I unfortunately get hit by Leech Seed. Water Gun is doing quite a bit of damage to Sudowoodo, and Mega Drain takes it down to 7 HP. I'm able to finish off the Love Disc with Rock Throw. Then out comes her final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Delcatty. I go for Headbutt, which takes down Roselia, thus taking away the Leech Seed, and a final Headbutt is able to finish off Delcatty. So despite the mistake, I'm able to beat her first try. Of course, you can't have a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video without the obligatory Mirror B. How you doing, Mirror B? Well, it's always a pleasure to see ya. And at level 25, Sudowoodo gets Rock Slide, which I teach over Rock Throw. And at level 24, Snorlax learns Yawn, which I teach over Defense Curl. And Sudowoodo statues at the Railgun Tower. Of course, I go in there and I pick up my two favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect, and I'm going to teach Hidden Power right away. Snorlax gets Hidden Power Ground, which is incredibly powerful, and Sudowoodo gets Hidden Power Steel, which isn't nearly as good, but could be okay. And then at the Tutor Lady, I teach Body Slam over Headbutt, and I get into this battle where I actually have no moves to hit Misdreavus. so that's a bit unfortunate. At level 28, I learned Rest, which I teach over Yawn. And then I go into the battle against Snaddle. He leads with a Quagsire and a Lantern. I go for Belly Drum on the first turn, hoping to just sweep. But unfortunately, I am slower than the Lantern, so I do get hit by Water Gun, which does do quite a bit of damage. Shockwave really doesn't do that much damage to Snorlax. I go for Rest to heal back up. Rock Tomb hits Snorlax, lowering its speed, but that doesn't really matter too much. And I miss a Rock Slide on the Quagsire, so it's not going to get flinched this turn. So it hits another Water Gun, taking me down to the Focus Band. Another Rock Slide miss on Lantern. Go for another one, but unfortunately Sudowoodo goes down. Snorlax really doesn't take that much damage from Water Gun. I take down the Quagsire with a single Body Slam, and then since I don't have any move to hit Lunatone for effective damage, I just go for Body Slam anyway, which takes it down. Then out comes Cast Form. Fruity Pebbles rain down. I go for another Body Slam into Cast Form. Weather Ball hits, getting a crit, taking me down pretty low. And because Lantern's health is dwindling, Flail is doing more and more damage. Fruity Pebbles rain down again. And now I'm much slower than everything else, and I get taken down by a critical Flail. Now the only thing I really need is a bit better luck on flinches, and to not rest immediately, and that's because resting immediately puts Sudowoodo in a very bad position where it's constantly taking damage from Water Guns. But if I just use Snorlax right off the bat without healing, I know I can take down every Pokemon up to the Cast Form without really being threatened. So I do just that. Body Slam takes down Lunatone, and then the Cast Form comes out, so this turn I'm going to use Rest to heal off the damage that it's about to do to me with Weather Ball, and as long as it doesn't get a crit, I think I'm safe. Which, Weather Ball takes me down to 25, I heal up, and then Water Gun is going to be used on Sudowoodo from here on out because it's slower than the Quagsire. But Sudowoodo has done its job very well, and Snorlax is all set up to take down the final two Pokemon without any real trouble. So, after the Fruity Pebbles, I use Body Slam into the Cast Form, which takes it down in a single hit, but not before it gets off a little Weather Ball, and then out comes Matang, which might be the only thing that can survive a Body Slam. So I am going to play it a little bit safe and just get rid of the Quagsire now, so that I'm not taking damage from multiple enemies. And as you can see, I'm taken down to 32 HP. And the Fruity Pebbles have worn off though. I go for Rest, and Metal Claw takes me down to 13. So even though I could have used Hidden Power Ground that turn, it was just safer to not risk it. And now Hidden Power Ground should just take it down in a single hit. And we beat Snaddle on the third attempt. Run into Bonsly, goodbye Bonsly. And I teach Snorlax Flamethrower over Hidden Power, and we go into the battle against Gonzap. Now he's with an Electrode and a Nuzleaf, and unfortunately Sudowoodo went down in the previous fight, so it's not here to help Snorlax in this fight. And unfortunately, using Belly Drum here takes me down to 2 HP, and I get finished off by Electrode. Okay, well going back into the fight again, this time with Sudowoodo, I go for Rock Slide and Belly Drum with Snorlax. Unfortunately, Snorlax does get hit by Fake Out, so it won't be able to start sweeping immediately. I go for Rock Slide and Belly Drum once again, but unfortunately Hyper Beam does take me down to nearly half health, so I'm only at 24 health when I pull off the Belly Drum, and I go for Rock Slide, taking down both of his starting Pokemon, out come Vileplume and Whiscash. So I do need to get a little lucky that they don't attack Snorlax. Water Pulse takes Sudowoodo down to 32, and Vileplume finishes it off. So I'm able to rest and get up to full health again. And luckily, Whiscash goes for Hyper Beam, and Vileplume goes for Hyper Beam. So now I don't need to worry about them attacking next turn. I go for Body Slam into Vileplume, taking it down. Then out comes his final Pokemon, which is Skarmory. And I'm going to go for Flamethrower here, but I think Body Slam could have just been a better move, because it actually survives with just a little bit of health. I go for Rest once again while they're both recharging, and I think as long as they don't both get crits, I should be fine. Hyper Beam takes me down to 130, and the second one takes me down to 92. They're both recharging this turn, go for Flamethrower to finish off the Skarmory, and Whiscash should just be a one-shot with Body Slam. And with that, we beat Gonzap pretty easily. At the top of the pyramid, I go ahead and teach Protect over Mimic, and I teach Snorlax Earthquake over Belly Drum, which might be a mistake, but we'll see. Anyway, go into the battle against Gonzap. He leads with a Celio and a Lairon. I go for low kick to take down the Celio, and body slam to start doing damage to the Slowking, while the Lairon uses protect. And I'm actually able to take it down further than I thought it would. I go for protect and earthquake, which takes down Lairon in a single hit and finishes off the Slowking. And then out comes Ursaring and Shadow Primeape, and I decided not to learn Covet because I don't think it's all that useful of a move. I go for low kick and body slam. Brick Break hits, doing quite a bit of damage to Snorlax with a crit. Low kick does finish off Ursaring in a single hit though. Out comes Shadow Hypno, body slam, takes it down below half. And I decide to go for Rock Slide and body slam, which Shadow Rush doesn't do enough to take down Snorlax. And Shadow Storm isn't enough to take down Snorlax either. Hypno survives on a thread of health, which is unfortunate. But I think I might survive another Shadow Storm. And I actually do on 6 HP, and Hidden Power finishes it off. So going into the final area of the game, Snorlax and Sudowoodo are doing very well, and if they can keep this momentum going, they could place very high on the tier list. So with that, we move into the battle against Lavrina. She leads with a Gardevoir and a Gorbis, and I go for Protect and Earthquake on the first turn, and get outsped, attracted, and immobilized by Love. Okay, well that's a little unfortunate. Rock Slide does quite a bit of damage to Gardevoir. I get hit by a Psychic, nearly doing half my health, but luckily Gorbis decides to use Water Pulse into Snorlax instead. I take down the Gorbis to get rid of the Attract, and then I go for Protect and Earthquake once again. And Roselia gets off a Leech Seed on Snorlax, unfortunately, which, even worse, gets transferred over to her Shadow Altaria, which is definitely her strongest Pokemon. But out comes Shadow Farfetch'd first. And then I go for Rock Slide, and then Body Slam into it, because I want to take it down as soon as possible, because I'd rather not be losing all the health. And I really thought Farfetch'd would go down to a single Rock Slide, but unfortunately it didn't. I hit myself in confusion. Altaria is now healing. Rock Slide finishes off the Farfetch'd, and does quite a bit of damage to Altaria, and as long as Snorlax hits, I beat Lavrina pretty easily. At the top of the mountain, I run into Snaddle once again. He leads with a Quagsire and a Metang, and I go for Protect and Earthquake. That way I can take down the Metang immediately and start doing damage to Quagsire. Unfortunately, it's not quite half health, and I go for Rock Slide and Flamethrower. That way I can take down the Scizor and deal a little bit of damage to Quagsire. That way it puts it in range for Earthquake to finish it off later. It gets off a Mud Shot, lowering my speed, which doesn't really matter anyway. I go for Hidden Power Steel and Body Slam to hopefully take down the Solrock, which it does with a crit. And then I go for Body Slam, which takes down the Quagsire. And then all that's left are his two last Pokemon, Shadow Starmie, which is incredibly powerful, and Castform. And I think that the Starmie is going to go for Shadow Storm like it normally would, so I go for Protect and Earthquake. Unfortunately, it uses Shadow Break, and Castform goes for Weather Ball, doing quite a bit of damage to Snorlax. And I didn't even do enough to take down Castform, and I'm down to 57 health. I go for Body Slam and Rock Slide, which Starmie now uses Shadow Storm, and Castform takes Sudowoodo down to 30 HP with Water Pulse, but luckily Sudowoodo hits through the confusion, and I'm able to take down both the Starmie and the Castform. Going into the battle against Ardos, he leads with a Shadow Swallow and Alakazam. I go for Body Slam into Alakazam and Rock Slide. Swallow sets up Shadow Sky, and Alakazam hits a Psychic, lowering my special defense. I'm able to take down the Alakazam with a Body Slam though, then out comes Kingdra, and unfortunately Rock Slide wasn't enough to take down Swallow. So I go for Protect and Body Slam because I suspect that Swallow is going to be using Shadow Half, which it does. Now Snorlax does have a way to heal it up, so it's not as big a deal for it. I take down the Kingdra, and then out comes the Heracross. I go for Rock Slide and Rest. That way I can heal up, but unfortunately Heracross outspeeds and takes down Snorlax. Rock Slide does take down the Swallow, and does a little bit of damage to Heracross. Out comes the Shadow Electabuzz, which is incredibly strong and fast, so it hits me with a Shadow Storm, taking me down in a single hit. So after a few more attempts, I decided to go ahead and teach Double Edge over Hidden Power, seeing as I'm not really going to use it anymore, and I go into the battle once again. This is now my 5th attempt, and I go for Protect on the first turn because Swallow decided to change its strategy and just start using Shadow Half on the first turn, go for Body Slam to finish off the Alakazam. And the thing is that the Swallow is consistently using Shadow Half, so it is a safe bet to leave it alive. Go for Double Edge, which almost takes down the Kingdra. Go for Rest to heal up Snorlax. Go for Protect, and call the Snorlax to wake it up. Another Shadow Half takes Snorlax down to half, but I do have the Leftovers item, so I am healing up a little bit every turn. I go for Flamethrower into Swallow because I know that the Heracross is going to be coming out in that position, unless the Kingdra takes itself down with Double Edge, and now I'm using Flamethrower into the Electabuzz coming out, which is still fine, but it's not as good as taking down the Heracross in a single hit. So now I decide to go for Protect and Earthquake. That way I can take down Electabuzz and Heracross. And one thing to note is that Sudowoodo is actually the MVP of this fight, because I have gotten to this point many times with just Snorlax, and Snorlax cannot do it himself. Sudowoodo, on the other hand, low kicks and takes down Snorlax in a single turn. Anyway, going into the battle against Corrigan, he leads with a Slowking and an Ursaring. I go for Double Edge, nearly taking down Slowking, but Body Slam finishes it off. Then out comes Aggron. I go for Protect and Earthquake, which luckily they both attack Sudowoodo. I go for Earthquake, taking down the Aggron, and doing half to the Ursaring. Out comes Walrein. I go for Low Kick and Body Slam into it. It hits Earthquake, not doing too much damage to us. And Low Kick actually takes it down in a single hit. Then out comes Poliwrath, which will take quite a bit of damage from Body Slam, about half. Go for a Low Kick into Ursaring to take it down, but Ursaring just goes for Earthquake, doing quite a bit of damage to its own partner. I finish off the Ursaring, and then out comes his final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Mr. Mime, and I go for Body Slam to finish off the Poliwrath. Now Mr. Mime is quite strong, but I don't think it can 1v1 Snorlax. It uses Shadow Storm, taking down Sudowoodo with a critical hit, but not doing that much damage to Snorlax. Body Slam does take it down to red. Another Shadow Storm, doing quite a bit more damage, but Body Slam finishes it off, and we beat Corrigan. Before the next fight, I go ahead and teach Ice Beam over Flamethrower, and we go into the battle against Aldous. He leads with a Shadow Manectric and a Ninjask, and I decide to go for Protect and Earthquake to take down the Manectric, seeing it as it is the biggest threat. And it goes down to a single Earthquake. Then out comes Salamence, who lowers both of our attacks with Intimidate. Fruity Pebbles rain down. And I go for Double Edge into it and Ice Beam. And Salamence just uses Shadow Hold, which is honestly great. Ice Beam's able to take down the Salamence, and then out comes Flygon, which should go down to an Ice Beam as well, so it's not really that big a threat. But I go for Double Edge and Ice Beam into it anyway, to guarantee that it'll go down. It hits Dragon Breath, paralyzing Sudowoodo, and Double Edge does take it below half. Ice Beam finishes it off. Out comes Shadow Marowak. Now this thing always has the potential to do a ton of damage and be very threatening, so hopefully it just misses. Go for Double Edge and Ice Beam into it. It hits Shadow End into Snorlax, taking it down in a single hit, and Sudowoodo gets paralyzed. And despite my best efforts, Shadow End finishes me off. So I need to change the strategy just a little bit. I go back into the battle again, but this time I decide to go for Rock Slide right off the bat to take down Ninjask and start doing damage to Manectric. Unfortunately, it does miss, so the Ice Beam that I use into Manectric isn't enough to take it down, and now I have to deal with both of them. And it'll use Shadow End this turn. Salamence luckily just goes for Shadow Hold, and Shadow End hits into Sudowoodo, doing quite a bit of damage. Rock Slide finishes off the Manectric, and does a little bit of damage to the Salamence. Ice Beam finishes it off. And at this point, Flygon and Marowak are out, which is still quite threatening, because I'm risking being paralyzed by Dragon Breath or just being taken down by Marowak. Luckily, I don't get paralyzed. Rock Slide hits, doing very little damage to both. Ice Beam does take down Marowak in a single hit though, and then out comes Lapras, his last Pokemon and a Shadow Pokemon. Lapras. Now, unfortunately, because the Fruity Pebbles are still up, it's just going to use Shadow Storm immediately, so I do need to protect with Sudowoodo to guarantee its life. I go for Ice Beam to take down the Flygon, and even though Sudowoodo is down to 7 HP, it still is incredibly valuable because it cuts down the damage of Shadow Storm by quite a lot. So, Shadow Storm hits, not really doing that much to Snorlax. Body Slam comes out, not really doing that much to Lapras. it sets up Shadow Sky again, go for another Body Slam, get a lucky Paralysis, which could come in handy. Another Body Slam, taking it down to red. And Shadow Storm does about a quarter of my health. Go for one last Body Slam to finish off, and we beat Eldest. Moving on to the big box legendary, Shallow. I go for Ice Beam and Rock Slide, which unfortunately Rock Slide misses. Ice Beam doesn't really do that much damage to it. Once again, Rock Slide takes it down to red, and Ice Beam finishes it off. But Snorlax is already below half health going into the final battle, so I doubt this is going to go well. But I can see just how strong my Pokemon are against them. Unfortunately, Snorlax gets burnt immediately. Sudowoodo is taken down to half health. Go for Rock Slide, which actually does take Moltres down in a single hit. Then out comes Executor. Body Slam does very little because I'm burnt. I go for Low Kick into the Rhydon and Ice Beam into the Executor. Shadow Wind hits, taking down Sudowoodo. And Ice Beam hits the Executor, not taking it down, and I go down to burn. Now several levels higher, and attempt number 7. I go back into it again. Shadow Fire really not doing that much damage. I get a lucky miss from the Rhydon, but unfortunately Moltres does evade our Rock Slide. I am able to take down Rhydon though with Ice Beam. Out comes Executor. I go for Ice Beam and Protect. That way I don't take more damage on Sudowoodo. And Ice Beam does finish off the Executor from half health. Out comes Tauros. And I go for Rock Slide and Rest, so that I can take down the Moltres and start healing. Tauros sets up Shadow Sky, and a critical hit Shadow Fire nearly takes the Snorlax down, so I'm glad I went for Rest. And then Fruity Pebbles rain down. And because I was intimidated, Rock Slide didn't quite finish off the Moltres. I call to wake up the Snorlax, and I go for another Rock Slide, taking Tauros down to half and finishing off Moltres. Then out comes Articuno. And this one could definitely be very threatening if I'm not able to take it down quickly, because it always has the chance to freeze me. Shadow Chill, take Sudowoodo down very far, go for Rock Slide, taking Articuno below half, Body Slam not quite finishing it off. I go for Rock Slide and Ice Beam into Tauros. That way if the Tauros survives, or if Zapdos comes out, I'm doing effective damage to it, which luckily both Pokemon do go down. Zapdos comes out and takes an Ice Beam, which does well over half, and since Zapdos doesn't have a spread move, I should be able to take it down with either Rock Slide or Ice Beam, and beat Gravel. So how well did Sudowoodo and Snorlax do? Well, they beat the game at a time of 9 hours, 8 minutes, and 18 seconds, both at level 59, and only fainted 18 times throughout the game, which is as well as I thought they would. And that's because they really have a lot going for them. Their move pulls are great, their typings are good, and their stats are great. Well, that would be if not for one glaring issue. They both share a 30 base speed stat, which is incredibly bad. Now, not so bad that they don't find themselves in the A+ tier, but being so slow all the time can make battles last much longer than they really need to, and it's really not that advantageous to be that slow, except for in very specific circumstances. The other issue is because they both have a 30 speed stat, and neither of their natures affect their speed, so oftentimes they just end up fighting each other on who's going to go first. The problem with that is that's really hard to plan out your next move when you're not sure which Pokemon is going to move next. And the other thing is that even though Snorlax is in this low level up group, because it's much more defensive, it finds itself surviving battles much more often than Sudowoodo does, even though it's in the medium fast level up group. They end up being about the same level throughout most of the game, just because of the survivability difference. Now, this is all just a nitpick on these two Pokemon, because honestly, I think that they are really good in this game, considering that they still find themselves in the A+ tier despite their speed being very low. Anyway, if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye!